All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the first Environmental Board meeting. I now call the January 13th Environmental Board meeting to order. I'm Megan Curtis Murphy. I am the Senior Sustainability Coordinator with the city, and I'll be serving as a staff liaison for this board. I've been with the city about 6.5 years, and we're really excited to have this board up and running and discuss all the important environmental topics that will come before it. So this evening, I'll be performing the duties of the board chair for this first meeting and the second one as we get up and going. So we'll be talking a little bit more later in the presentation, what some of the roles are with being the board chair and vice chair, and we'll be looking for some members who will be interested in serving in those roles in the future. So you can let us know later if that's something that you'd be interested in. I have a few logistics to go through for our virtual meeting protocols. So as you all know, today's meeting is a virtual meeting. So we have participants attending by both phone and video this evening. So for all meeting attendees, please speak clearly and pause frequently. State your name each time before speaking. Mute your microphone when not speaking. And for those joining us by video, your microphone is muted when it is orange, just as a reminder. And you can use the call-in information in the meeting if you're having any technical difficulties. I know we have some power outages there, so that might be a timely item for this evening. Just a reminder that we have the chat function, and that should only be used for indicating that you have a question or a comment, and then the chair will recognize you in order to make those comments. So I will now go ahead and call roll for the board members who are in attendance this evening. Please unmute your phone and say here when I call your name, and we will go ahead in alphabetical order. So Tom Anderson.
Here.
Saria Bola-Pragada.
Here.
Nancy Davidson.
Here.
Jamie Finch.
Here.
Cameron Fisher.
Here.
Rishi Hazra.
Here.
Dan Hintz.
Here.
Laura Labico.
Here.
Danny Madden.
Here.
Don McWilliams. Don, can you hear us? Thank you. We hear you and see you. I know you have a little bit of a delay due to the power outages. Thank you. Anne Newcomb.
Here.
And Janet Wall.
Here.
Great. Thank you very much. We have a full house for this first meeting, so great start. I would now like to go ahead and introduce the mayor. She'll be providing a few introductory words for us. So Mayor Mary Lou Pauley.
Thank you, Megan, and welcome everybody to this first meeting. It's been an odd year, and these virtual meetings are much different than what we're used to. You can all see each other and see the chat box, but I just want you to be aware that this software for the public is a really difficult one. They are able to call in and hear, and they can follow if it is streaming live on their computer. Tonight it is not. So please make sure that you remember that they're also here, they're also in the room, and make sure when we're addressing or talking about things that we're cognizant of that. I'm hopeful that at some point in time, these different software packages that we're using for these meetings will be able to provide the protection and also the opportunities to see everyone. We are not quite there with what we have now, but we hear that the software is changing all the time. So welcome to this strange virtual world you are joining us in. It is unusual for our city to create new boards and commissions. It doesn't happen very often, and it's quite an exercise to go through. Megan has been working on this for a really long time, including going back, working with the council and just sussing out exactly what kind of duties this board should have in order to be able to feed information and recommendations to the council so that they can make decisions. You know, most of our work starts with the council approving a budget, the administration preparing a work plan, and then your liaisons such as Megan, preparing a particular work plan for your board or commission, activities that you will go through the year that will feed back into the council decision-making process at some point in time. We've really taken on a lot on the to-do list in the environmental world, like a lot. I hope we didn't intimidate any of you in the interviews when we were talking about the whole host of subjects and topics that you will encounter. But we will take them on thoughtfully and at a pace that is manageable for both you and the council in terms of processing policy and decisions. But we want to be a leader here. We want to talk about the environment. We want to talk about climate, our surface water, our groundwater, our drinking water, our forests. Everything is on the table in here. And we have a bunch of guiding documents in the city that needed to be updated, that need to be updated and need to reflect where we are here in 2020. One of the first ones being our land use code, shortly followed by our building code. These are big tasks, and we're hoping that the lens that you bring to it with your varied experiences and opinions and values will help shape the guidance that the council has to do this, to do some of the work they have to do this year. These are going to be big, heavy lifts for them, and they rely on you for the community voice, the community lens, the hashing out and digging in on the details to make sure that they're getting good information when they go to make their decision. It was an absolute pleasure and honor to meet you all through the interview process, and the decision making to get it down to just a few faces you see here today was really, really tough. But congratulations. I think we've got a great group here. Megan will work hard with our city clerks to make sure that you get enough introduction and training into our processes and our procedures that you feel comfortable in doing your job and having your meetings. And so welcome. I'm going to hang around for the first 20 minutes or so, and then I have another meeting that I need to take off and go to. Welcome. I think you're going to enjoy it. And as the mayor, I just appreciate you stepping up and helping our community in this way. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you, Mayor. Yes, we are really excited to be here in this first meeting here. And as the mayor said, there's going to be a lot of different topics we'll be able to cover, and we'll be talking about those a little bit more in tonight's program. So looking forward to that. So as you know, the regular board meeting schedule will be this second Wednesday of the month at 6:30. We will have 2 board meetings in January. So the second meeting on the 27th will be a special meeting at that same time. But then moving forward, we'll just have that 1 meeting a month. So tonight we're going to go through a lot of those introductory pieces, kind of learning more about what it means to be a board member for the environmental board, learning about the roles. We'll have a presentation on the open government training, talking about the open public meetings. That will be presented by Tina Eggers in our clerk's office. I'll then provide a board overview of the content of the board and the work plan that we're going to be doing this evening. And then we'll hear from Tisha Gieser about the rules and regulations and have a bit of a discussion around that. So we're looking forward to getting into all of those items tonight. But first, we want to hear a little bit from our board members themselves. I know the community is excited to meet you all, and it'll be great to hear from each of you. So we're just going to go a little bit of a round robin for introductions this evening. So if you could go ahead and just say your name and how long you've been living in Issaquah, or if not in Issaquah, in the area. And then let us know your favorite natural or environmental related feature in Issaquah. So just so we can get to know people a little bit more. And I can go ahead and start us off, give everyone a little bit of time. And I will also have Liepa, who is the Office of Sustainability intern, go after me as well, and she can provide her introduction. She'll be taking the meeting minutes here and be helping us out a lot, so we're really excited to have her on board. So as I said, I'm Megan Curtis Murphy. I do not live in Issaquah. I am in Seattle, but again, I've been with the city for 6.5 years. And my favorite feature is Tradition Plateau. I really enjoy it because when I was working in the office before all this remote time, it was a place that I could go and walk on lunch breaks. And then on the weekends is a place I could bring my family. So I really liked having kind of that connection from weekday to weekend there. I will now turn it over to Liepa.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Liepa. I'm the current intern at the Office of Sustainability. I've been interning since October. And my favorite environmental aspect of Issaquah is the hiking trails in Squawk Mountain. I've been there just once. Hopefully that counts part of Issaquah. So thank you.
Great. And we'll go ahead in the same order that I was calling on people before. So Tom Anderson, please.
Yes, thank you. Well, I've lived in Issaquah about 48 years. I actually lived next door to the house I grew up in as a child here in Issaquah, and somehow managed to make it build a house next to it, and I've been living there with my wife ever since. Well, my favorite, I live a stone's throw from the high school trail, which goes up onto the Tradition Plateau and then on into Tiger Mountain areas. And so I'll be a little more specific than Tradition Plateau, Round Lake. I enjoy going there and just seeing it change through the seasons. Like just in the last few weeks here, it's been very interesting to see it go from a marsh. During the summer, it's marsh, and we didn't get a whole lot of rain during the fall, so it was still a marsh until the last few weeks, and now it's full. Now it really is a lake. So it's fun to just kind of watch that cycle through the seasons there in Round Lake.
Thank you. Surya.
Hi, my name is Surya Bolapragada. I've lived in Issaquah for the last 9 years. And my favorite natural feature of Issaquah is probably Poo Poo Point because my friends and I like to go there on the weekend since it's close by, and that's probably one of our favorite hikes because it's so easy to drive to. And I love when I take like my cousins or my family members, and they're like so shocked that we have this like beautiful trail and this beautiful view like so close to our house. And I think that's like a really special place in my heart.
Thank you. Nancy.
Hi, I'm Nancy Davidson, and I've lived in Issaquah for a total of 15 years, but I took a short break and lived in Bellevue for about 13 years in the middle of it. Most recently, only about a year and a half in Issaquah since I've been back. My favorite thing in the city is the rivers and streams. I really like watching all the different streams and seeing how they change throughout the seasons. Thank you.
Thank you. Jamie.
Hi, I'm Jamie Finch. I've lived in Issaquah for about 2 years, although I've been on the east side and general Seattle area my whole life. My favorite feature, kind of again narrowing in on the Tradition Plateau, is the big tree, the big Doug fir up on the Big Free Trail. So yeah, thank you.
Thanks. Cameron.
Cameron Fisher. I've been here in Issaquah for about 10 years, a little over, and one of the interesting areas I enjoy just taking my kids down to the hatchery and seeing the excitement of their learning of salmonids and enjoying their hatchery. So nothing too natural, but still a nice feature.
Thank you. Rishi.
Hi, I'm Rishi. I've been living near Issaquah, namely Sammamish, and also Klahani for about 16 years, or my whole life. And my favorite kind of natural feature about Issaquah is Yellow Lake and the Yellow Lake trails. They make for some really nice long-distance cross-country runs, an hour off.
Thank you. Dan.
Hi, my name is Dan Hintz. I've been in Issaquah for 2 years, working here a little bit longer, but Seattle for about a decade before that, and originally from the Midwest, grew up outside of Chicago. Jamie, big tree, that was going to be my number one answer, but luckily I had a backup prepared too. Hard to rank favorites in Issaquah, there's so many options, but the blue heron rookery in the state park in the spring is pretty amazing to see, just, dozens of pairs of blue herons nesting and pretty constantly flying over you. Great spot to check out if you haven't.
It's good tips with this introduction question. That might have been a secret of mine. Laura.
Hi, I've lived in Issaquah off and on for, I don't know, 6 or 7 years, I think. And I think my favorite feature is either the high school trail, just because it's so beautiful and access to so many things, or the Salmon Run Park. The renovation there, I think, was really phenomenal from an engineering standpoint. How, especially looking at the flooding right now, how it's capturing all that water is like, it's mind blowing that it's actually functioning. So I think it's cool.
Great, thank you. Don.
I'm Don McWilliams. I've lived in the region since I was a little kid, all over the Snoqualmie Valley. I'm actually out in Preston. I've been out here for the last 3 years. And I'd say my favorite feature of Issaquah is Issaquah Creek running right through the middle of town. It's pretty spectacular to have a salmon-bearing stream running right through the center of town. And I miss salmon days, so hopefully we can get back to that one time.
Yes, for sure. Anne.
Hey, I'm Ann Newcomb. I moved here in 1984, so lived here since bought my first house up in High Point, and so I've lived here for 36 years or so. And I love all of the trails, but really love getting out on Lake Sammamish, doing kayaking and paddleboarding. It's a new favorite. Or actually, my husband and I have been doing it for quite a few years now, so I wouldn't say a new favorite. But yeah, so many great things about Issaquah. Thank you.
Thanks. And Janet. And I believe you're on mute, Janet.
Yes, I've lived in Issaquah for about 25 years. After I retired from National Marine Fishery Service, and my favorite place, it's hard to choose. I've been working lately up on the Tradition Plateau with Henry Muston from Seattle, removing holly, which there's certainly a sizable population of that on the plateau, and we're hoping to remove that and make it more native.
Great. Thank you very much to everyone for that. That was really, I learned some new places to go, I think. So I hope the community members did as well. So now we will go ahead and go to our first presentation for the evening. So the open government training with Tina. And she's up. There you go.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, there was some noise in the background, so I was just alerting those that were nearby that what was about to happen. Thank you. As your city clerk, I've worked for Issaquah for about 16 years. I have about 27 years experience in local government, and it's a pleasure to meet some new faces, and thank you for stepping forward and being on a board and commission. So it's a pleasure to be here. I am going to shift over to sharing, and it's a little bit different environment here on this computer, so bear with me. Here we go. Okay. So this evening, the open government training, it's mandated by state law. It's to cover a couple areas, one of them being the Open Public Meetings Act, and the other is surrounding records and how they need to be accessible. So with that, I am going to talk first about the intent. So this sort of the concept or the ideas behind OPMA and the Public Records Act aren't new. They've been around since 1970, 71, and they were created by the people of Washington State. What you'll see, though, is that the open government training component is a requirement that you all have at a minimum of every 4 years. We like to ensure that we're talking about it more frequently, though, so you'll see us come back to you and do refreshers as you get new board members. And it's good that we're having the conversation because we all want you to stay in the right lanes so that you can serve as your commission as a board member better and stay out of trouble. So basically the training is to increase knowledge, decrease violations, reduce risk and lawsuits, and ultimately ensure that we are eliminating inadvertent violations. I've been in the clerk world for some time, and I haven't seen or experienced anyone deliberately violating these rules. If and when situations arise, they're typically inadvertent, and so we want to help each other, again, stay in the right lane. So OPMA, again, that stands for Open Public Meetings Act. You'll hear that referenced throughout this session, and you'll see it in other elements. So when you applied for this position on this board, we referenced that OPMA applied. We also talked about this training. You'll hear it in your rules and regs, and you'll see it in some other documents on your ethics documents that you'll need to sign. So basically it means that your meetings are open from start to finish. It means that the public has a right to be present, they have a right to observe, and that, again, this is all for being open and transparent to the public. So Megan touched on what the difference was between some of your meetings. You have a regular schedule where your meetings start the second Wednesday of each month, 6:30 p.m. And currently your designated location will be the Pickering Room, unless that changes through motion or adoption of your rules and regs. So because of COVID-19, we are having this meeting virtually, and we will continue to do so for as long as we can. Any meeting that's held outside of your regular date, time, or location is considered a special meeting. And that is important to understand because there's certain noticing requirements with that. And we want to make sure that if you have a special meeting, that we've really articulated to the public and you what's on the agenda, what action is being considered. If we were silent on taking maybe final action on a topic, we would need to delay that until it was really explicit on the agenda. Your special meetings can be referred to not just for having it an extra meeting during the month, but it could be for the purposes of work planning, having a workshop, having a retreat. So just keep that in mind, that it could be very well that you are conducting business that you would at a regular meeting, but if it was being held at a different date, time, or location, it could have a different header to it. And again, all meetings must have agendas and minutes. Our agendas by state law must at least have been posted 24 hours before the meeting, but we strive to do better than that. We really want you all to be prepared, and we want the public to understand what is in front of you. So if they have an interest to attend, they have that ability to. And while the public is not required to have a voice at your meetings, it's important to us and we value it, and we provide those elements on the agenda. Again, the public's portion is really their ability to attend and observe. And then as you provide those opportunities for public comments, public hearings, surveys, or other elements through outreach, those elements are important. There are few occasions where meetings can be closed, and I can't think of any that would warrant that for this commission, but I do like to talk about it because you will see it happening with other boards or commissions or councils. Those are called executive sessions. And again, it's very limited. It's very specific to what is in state law. Can be for discussion only. Action cannot be taken in the closed meeting. That has to occur in open session. And again, it's for very few and specific items. You'll see our council do it to discuss things like lawsuits, pending litigation, maybe property acquisitions and things like that. And of course, there are specific items that would take place. The presiding officer has to be very clear and state the purpose, cite the full RCW that allows that. We also have to indicate the amount of time that we anticipate to be in that closed session. And again, that's about being as open and transparent as we can about these confidential closed door sessions. Again, it's not something I see this board needing to do. And if there were a situation that we encountered, the clerk's office and our legal department would help you through that step. So OPMA. So what constitutes a quorum of your board? That would be 5 members. It's basically the majority of your board. And while you are allowed to gather and travel and be friends and go to potlucks, that sort of thing, what you can't do in groups of 5 is to talk about business of your commission. And the definition is really broad. So it's about things like public testimony, deliberations, discussions, considerations, reviews, evaluations. And of course, you cannot take final action unless it's been a noticed meeting and indeed has a quorum. So we want you to be mindful of that, particularly when you're doing things like potentially replying through your group email address, or maybe talking with a board commission member and then maybe 2 days later talking to another commission member. We want to ensure that you aren't inadvertently having a string meeting through discussions of items that are in front of you. If you have a subcommittee, that's appropriate. You can work in small groups, but then again, you'd be reporting back to the larger body. We want to make sure that it isn't inadvertently happening through, say, 2 people talking about the business of the commission and then going and talking to another person about that item and then 2 other people. So it could be a combination of email, phone, in person. Again, it's something we want to avoid, and we look to you all to help each other, stay in that safe zone, which is save your discussions for the meetings. That's why you have them. The public has the right to hear it, and you all have the right to hear that conversation. It's really important as you're deliberating. If you have items that you wish to maybe share with the commission, please do that through your staff liaison, because they're the ones who can help shape that information in a way that doesn't violate OPMA. They can also help solicit information from you all, gather it, package it up, and then repurpose it in your packet. And again, the public would be able to have access to that and see that. And if there's any questions along the way, please speak up, Megan, because I'm in an environment that I may miss someone raising their hand or commenting. Because this is state-driven and mandated, there are personal liabilities for those that choose to purposely violate OPMA, and those individuals would see themselves in court be fined $500 for the first violation and $1,000 for each subsequent violation. I haven't personally seen that, but in Washington State, I have been observing the OPMA lawsuits and rules out there, and a lot of our neighboring jurisdictions have had situations where there have been lawsuits or penalties. So they do get rather expensive on the city side because there's city liability with costs and attorney fees. And ultimately, the action that a board, commission, or council could take would mean that the action is considered null and void. Again, nothing that I have seen in my career, but there are agencies out there that have had situations like this. And again, back to the purpose of the Sunshine Laws, or this Open Government Training Act, is twofold. The open public meetings and then accessible records. And the 2 elements to fall under accessible records is the Public Records Act and records management. So I'm going to talk just 1 or 1.5 slides on that, which is state law and our own Issaquah Municipal Code provide some guidelines on, well, not just guidelines, they set the laws on the public records rules, and the city clerk is designated as your public records officer. So members of the public, the media, businesses, someone from in another state wish to ask for records from the city, they would do that through my office. And then I would determine, do we have such a record? Where does the record live? Who do I need to talk to? And it's potentially in a situation where I might need to reach out to you all and say, here's a request, here's what I'm looking for, here's what I need you to do. I would help you, I would give you some parameters. Again, this part of a legal search doesn't happen all that often, but it is possible. Your staff lead is the one who is my first go-to person. They're going to be responsible for all of your core agendas and minutes and your supplemental information. You have a right to take meeting notes and keep them at your hand as you need them. If and when you find that they're of no use to you, you can discard those. However, if I have a specific records request for that type of document and it relates to the business that you do, at that time you would need to not discard, you would need to work with me to transfer it over, and then I would work to determine if that information is indeed disclosable. So I can think back to maybe, it's been a couple years, but I had to work with the Human Service Commission on to determine if they had any notes or communications with some individuals that related to our senior center. And it was a very easy process. I worked with the commission, and I think ultimately there was only 2 records that got moved forward. And other than that, the staff liaison had the records that I needed to complete that records request. I can tell you that our email system is designed so that any email that comes in and out of our system, we've captured. So that's the first course that I will use and go to. If the records request was written in a way that extended beyond that, I might have to work with you and say, do you have things like text messages, or do you have any other emails outside of our system that would pertain to X? And if so, I would need to work with you on ensuring that you preserved them and that you were working with me to transfer them over. And again, there's a legal obligation to that. So I want to make it very clear. It doesn't happen very often. I encourage you to be organized in the work that you do. And if you have records that you maybe just keep from one meeting to the next, it's a good habit to get into. Or at least I would encourage you not to use text. I would encourage you to use the same email account that you would, that you provided Megan, as far as your how to communicate to you, and limit it to that. Are there any questions so far?
I'm not seeing any.
Okay,
but
I'll keep talking and
just a
see
reminder
if any
to
more
folks.
come up.
Yep, just a reminder, folks, that you can chat in the chat that you have a question or comment. Then we will go ahead and call on you there. And I believe one person might be doing that.
Okay, so while we're waiting for that to be called up, I'll just conclude this with, we do have a code of ethics, and it does reiterate the Public Records Act, the Open Public Meetings Act, and your responsibility, conflicts of interest, which you also will see some of that in your rules and regs that Tisha will talk about, and then what you can and cannot do with regard to political activity in your position as a commissioner or a board member. So you all will need to go to issaquah.gov/ethics, and that document will provide some guidance, some Q&A, and once you've read through that, you can submit that on to me. Once you have submitted it, it'll be on file. And again, if you have any questions, the clerk's office is a great resource to you. Tisha will talk more about later about your rules and regs. And as you obtain new membership, again, it's a great opportunity to bring the clerks back to do some refresher training, and we welcome that. So I'm just going to close down my screen so that I can see the group and answer any questions.
Great. It looks like we have a question from Tom Anderson. So Tom, you can unmute yourself and ask your question. And just a reminder, use the chat just to say you have a question or comment. So we'll start with Tom.
Okay, yes, I was just wondering whether it'd be a good idea to record our notes in a bound notebook so it's a consistent and record that can be acquired if necessary, and the whole history is there. Is that a good idea or a bad idea?
I would say if you're the type of individual that likes to keep ongoing notes, that's perfectly fine. I would say if you can keep them organized in a binder or a folder or whatever that is for you, that is a really good habit. That way you just have one place to go and it's at the ready. I know that not everyone can be that organized. So if the notes don't serve you beyond that moment, I would say discard them, get rid of them. But if you can stay organized, it's perfectly fine to keep them in one place and ongoing. So personal preference.
Thanks.
Sure.
The next question is from Anne.
Yeah, I just wanted more clarification, as Tom did, on keeping notes. Usually I just keep all of my emails. So you said don't do text, but does it make sense for us to keep all of our emails so we can go back and reference things?
Yeah, if they're important to you and help you with referencing, that's perfectly fine. We'll have the emails that have been received to and from on the city server. So that generally satisfies the request. So long as you're including your staff liaison, that seems to be sufficient. There could be a time though that I may ask you, do you have anything outside of our emails? And I'll give you a little affidavit to complete, and you would walk through that process.
Okay. And so if we're in a committee, will we have a staff liaison? Will we want to include Megan with the committee, any committee that we're on as well?
I guess that's a decision for Megan in her capacity. In the committees that I've worked on with the board and commission, I typically have stayed connected, but that may not be the case if there isn't the capacity. So I would say keep good notes, and when appropriate, include your chair and your staff liaison, so long as you're not violating the 5-member rule.
Okay, thanks.
The next question is from Laura.
I just wanted to know if you could unpack a bit what the liability is, considering this is a mostly volunteer position. The idea of me spending money on something I didn't intend to be framed for is uncomfortable. So I was just wondering what, it's theoretical. I'm sure that nothing will be as dramatic, but if you could tell us a couple examples or what that would even look like.
Sure. Well, let's say you disregarded the training. Let's say you had intent and you went and violated OPMA in such a way that it created some sort of lawsuit, and then it would have to be so extreme. We would be hopefully catching and correcting that behavior, because we want to keep you all in the right lane. I haven't personally seen it in my career, and I've been doing this for 27 years, but I know other agencies have different experiences.
Can you give any, it seems like it would be something that's more malicious, basically, because we don't really have much exposure to action in general, right?
Yeah, it would be malicious. It would have to be that you didn't work with us to change behavior, that you didn't turn over records when you should, it would be really malicious behavior.
Thank you. Yeah, just wanted more detail. Thanks.
And the next question is from Don.
Hi, Tina. So kind of a twofold question. So if we have emails between ourselves outside of the system, are those subject to public records request? And kind of rule of thumb, would you advise that we just CC Megan on any of those kind of emails?
Yeah, I would caution you about having conversations with other board members unless you had a role. Really, the intent is to save the conversation and discussion for these meetings. But so long as you're not violating OPMA, you can have those conversations. I would encourage you to include Megan where appropriate so that we have access to those emails. Even by providing Megan on the email chain, it's possible, it's remote, but it's possible that the requester could say, I also want the other end of that email that sent it. And then I would have to work with you and determine, is it something that you had saved along the way? And if so, you know, is it responsive? And I would work with you on pulling the information over. It does mean that the email address or accounts that you're using could be searched. So, you know, I have some other elected officials that I've worked with where maybe they send it to their work email, and now their work email has to be searched for certain parameters, and that may not be a pleasant experience for their business.
Okay, thank you.
And we have a question from Jamie.
Hi, Tina. Yeah, I was wondering if you could expand a bit on, I think you called it chain meetings, just around like the subject matter, like is that narrowly the same topic that would be covered? And then is there some sort of time limit or something that we should be aware of, or just expand more on what
Yeah. Let's say you have an item on an agenda that's next month, and you have strong opinions about it, and you are trying to convince another commissioner that this is the right path and the way to do it, and you've done it in such a way that you've had that conversation with, you know, 3 or 4, you know, at least 4 other people. Again, that's about sharing and deliberating that agenda topic, and you want to ensure that you're doing it at the meeting.
Thank you. And a question from Rishi.
Yeah, I just had a question whether or not there's a city email we can use if we want to keep our like personal email out of it from like the personal public records liability.
Not at this time, but it is a good point and a conversation that would be appropriate for our IT group. We have a rather large board and commission membership. So again, I'm not certain if that's on their work plan for this year or next year, or how we would phase into that. But it's a really good question, and one that I can get back to you through your staff liaison to let you know where that might be in the works.
Thank you.
I had one more comment since that was raised. You might consider a separate email that you only used for this business. That is a good way to start off on a new board.
Okay, and I'm not seeing any other questions or comments. If you have any, go ahead and type that in. But thank you for that presentation. That was a lot of information, and you can always go back and reference the presentation, or feel free to ask me questions if you have any along the way, and we'll make sure we get all of your questions answered.
Thank you.
All right, so moving on to the next item, I'm going to do a board overview of the work plan. So give me just a moment as I share my screen. All right, and if any questions come in during it, Yepa, if you want to go ahead and let me know if you see any come in, because I may not have my eye on the chat, that would be great. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and start with, not this slide. I'm going to go ahead and start with a bit of a higher level overview about the city a little bit, and then we'll get into more info specifically on the board and the work plan. But as we know, Issaquah is located in the urban growth boundary, and we have a population of about 40,000. And I know we have people that have lived here for many years and people that have lived here for less years, and I really like having those different perspectives on the board. But we have been growing and more people want to be coming to Issaquah. So we've taken steps in the past to try to preserve some of our areas as we do some development. For example, when we developed both the Highlands and Talus communities, we made them more dense so that we were able to preserve the forested hillsides on the side. We've also have a central Issaquah plan. So we were trying to have more development in the central Issaquah area as we move forward, as people start to move here more. I also mentioned that we are growing not both just in numbers, but also in diversity here in Issaquah. I've provided a few links throughout this presentation you can reference later, but here is a link to our demographic information. So I think this is important because it's really important to recognize different perspectives, whether it's people from different ethnic backgrounds, different ages, different income levels. So it's great to see who is living in the community now. For a little bit of information, in Issaquah, we have about 65% of the population is white, 23% is Asian, 9% is Hispanic, 2% is Black, and 5% is two or more races. And the city has been really committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion in our policies and practices. Following the killing of George Floyd last year, we've been doing a lot of work on that internally and with the community, and we really appreciate all the community's perspective and that they have offered on this. We've been working on a police accountability, equity, and human services action plan, which is an 18-month action plan, and working through that. And I mentioned this work for the environmental board because it's something that we'll want to consider in our work as well. As we know, climate change often affects people from lower income communities, and it's important to take that into consideration as we go through our work. So next, I want to touch on the city's strategic plan. So this was adopted in 2019, and it lays out the city's priorities for the next 5 years. The visual here on the right shows the city's vision, mission, and guiding principles, as well as our goal areas. So the goal areas are the colored areas in the circle. And as you can see, environmental stewardship is one of those. So we had a very robust process when we worked with the community to develop the strategic action plan. And the environment really rose to the one of the top categories as items that people in our community care about. I think that's one of the reasons why we have the environmental board today and have such a big work plan with all the items, because we want to make sure that we are preserving what we have and making sure that it is strong for future generations here as well. The inner circle there of the white is from our guiding principles, and you can see that the environment is mentioned there as well. The next link is to the Office of Sustainability. So the Office of Sustainability is housed under the Executive Office, and that is the office that Yepa and I work out of. And just there you can find some of the items that we've worked on before. We do a lot with climate policy and green building. We work really closely with our Public Works Department on recycling and the solid waste contract. Also working to reduce single occupancy vehicles and promote more alternative modes, also through our Public Works Department. So there's a lot more information there about some of the work that we've done in the city. Next, we have a link to the environmental board page. We have about 15 boards and commissions in the city. So on that page, you're able to see on the left-hand side all of the other boards that we have: human services, economic vitality, development. So it really spans a lot of different topics. And as the mayor mentioned, we don't add a lot of new boards. So it's great that we have the environmental board to complement a lot of that work that's been done. Previously, before the environmental board, we also had a river and streams board that did a little bit more work on some development review and had a little bit of a more narrow scope. So the environmental board was formed to have a little bit more of a broader scope and to look at climate issues as well. But we also still address a lot of the items that that board used to address. The next and the last link here is just a link to the environmental board ordinance. We'll go through a couple of those pieces next, but it talks more about like the duties and responsibilities of the board and some of those founding items. So if you ever need to reference that, you can look there. So overall, as I mentioned, we worked really hard last year with the community in several different meetings to develop what we want this board to be representing and discussing. And through work with the community, our Planning Policy Commission, and City Council, we developed this board objective. So the objective is the environmental board will protect, preserve, and enhance the natural environment and take action on climate change to reduce its impacts by advising the mayor, city council, and city departments on the plans, policies, regulations, and programs related to environmental stewardship. So again, you'll see that environmental stewardship is there. That comes as a term, one of the goal areas from the strategic plan. So a lot really builds back up to that. We're looking at both the natural environment and climate change, and there'll be a lot of topics that we'll be able to discuss from that. So this slide just goes a little bit into the board duties and responsibilities. All of those are listed fully in the ordinance, so this is kind of a snapshot of that. But I'll talk about a few examples as I go through some of these. So the first is to provide feedback on city plans, regulations, and codes. So this could be providing input on some of the code development that we'll be doing with the Title 18 Land Use Code. The next is to establish formal board statements to track the board's recommendations. So this is something that really came out of that community process, wanting to make sure that all the input that we hear from the board is really carried throughout the process. So once the board is making a recommendation on an item, we want to document that and make sure the staff sees it, whoever's working on the project, council sees it, the administration sees it. So we really want to honor that work that's being done here in the board. The next is review research and best practices to advise on environmental policies. The next is advise on the implementation of a natural environment checklist used on development projects. This is something that, again, kind of goes back to some of that community work that we did. So as I mentioned, our former River and Streams Board did a little bit more of a review process of projects. We didn't want to lose that entirely, so we've created a new process that's outside this board, where we're going to be having neighborhood meetings for projects with critical areas. So there'll still be an opportunity for the public to get involved in that. And the role of this board in that will be really to advise on the implementation of the materials that are going into that and the process itself. So that is getting started, and after a few uses of that checklist and having that process, we'll have a presentation to the board where you'll be able to hear how it's going and provide feedback on that overall process. The next is to advise on planning and prioritization of actions related to climate change and resiliency. So this is looking at both climate change mitigation, reducing our greenhouse gas emissions, and then resiliency is really how we're able to adapt to the changing climate and better prepare ourselves for those impacts. Some that we're seeing even in these recent times with increased flooding, areas, reduced snowpack in some years, fluctuations in temperatures. So we'll be able to get into more of that as we get into our climate action plan. The next is develop recommendations on programs, services, practices, priorities related to environmental sustainability and protection. That could be on a whole host of topics, and it will be throughout our time, not all in one meeting, not maybe even all in one year, but encompasses a lot of different programs, whether it's recycling related or other topics. And last, we've committed to provide an annual report to the mayor and city council. So this will be an opportunity to let the city council know what we've worked on in the year, how that lines up with some of the performance metrics and goals, environmental goals for the city, and get feedback from them also on work plan items for future years. So I think that'll be a really great touch point with the council. Here, I'm just showing a sample flow of work. So for example, we'll be discussing the electric vehicle charging ordinance at our next meeting. I'll talk about this in terms of that. So the city staff prepares, a draft ordinance that would come before the board. We present it to the board and get your input and recommendations. If there's things you think that should be changed or you think it should be passed as is, we want to, capture all of those and be able to pass that on. So that's compiled in that recommendation report that I was referencing earlier that will travel with this document, whether it goes to another commission first. So for example, the Planning Policy Commission, or if it's going to council, they'll be seeing the work of this board. We'll also be incorporating that feedback, as it pertains to the various items. If we're able to change something based on a recommendation, or if there's a reason not to, we'll make sure we're able to document all of that. So then that goes to City Council. And the council has been instructed to give substantial weight to the recommendations provided by this board. That's another thing that came out of this community review process. Again, we really want to be taking the input that we're gathering from all the time that you're spending on this and really make sure that it has careful consideration at all the different levels. So getting a little bit into the work plan topics. The first topic we have is the climate action plan. This is something we're going to get started on pretty soon. It'll be at one of the upcoming meetings, but we'll be developing that over this year, looking for what priorities and criteria we want to be bringing into the plan, looking at the specific actions and implementation of that. The next is the Title 18 land use codes. You can see there's a lot of different topics for this. This is not all the topics for Title 18. There's several others. Some will be going to other boards and commissions. Others, we will probably have joint meetings, maybe with the Development Commission on them. But this is an item that is going to be coming before the board a lot this year. And I think mostly it'll be starting in Q2 rather than Q1 of this year. But there'll be an opportunity to talk about a lot of these topics. We'll be able to have some expert opinion coming in and documentation beforehand. So don't look at this list and think you have to know everything about all of these topics. We'll be introducing all of the content that you'll need for your discussions at these meetings. So, and through the agenda packet. So you'll have an opportunity to really, look at the information beforehand before coming in for the discussion. And it won't all be at once either. So we'll take it in kind of bits and pieces along the way. So we'll be able to have good, robust discussions on those.
Megan,
Mhm.
this is Tisha. It looks like Laura has a question.
Great, Laura.
Oh, it was a while. I can wait until the end. That's fine. Keep going. Thanks.
All right. Sorry about that. I don't even know where my chat screen went, but I'll find it. So the next is the electric vehicle charging policy. Again, that's something that I mentioned will be coming at the next board meeting. So we'll be able to talk about that more then. The Storm and Surface Water Master Plan. This is something that hasn't been updated in many years for the city, so it's really timely. Staff has begun work on it, but we'll be bringing that to the board in the first quarter, so we'll have an opportunity to provide input and talk about that. One of the things with that we're going to be looking at is some of the climate policies and assumptions that we want to put into that plan. Next is the capital improvement plan. This is the 6-year plan that the city makes to think about what projects we're going to be doing and plan for those, whether it's a new roof somewhere, a new HVAC system. So it'll just be an opportunity to get a little bit more information about what the city's working on and think about it in the environmental context, which I think will be great to have this board do. Next is the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination Program. So that will be kind of a report on some water quality activities that our Public Works Department does. The next is the Natural Environment Checklist, which I was talking about on the last slide. The next is a commercial recycling outreach program. Right now we are offering some technical assistance to businesses to try to reduce their waste and make sure that they are recycling right. That's through a grant program that we have, so we'll be able to get a report back on how that work is going later this year. The solid waste contract, this is something that we contract with Recology right now on, and their contract is going to be coming up. So sometimes we look at various aspects of the contract for, do we want to have some public outreach components? Do we want to have kind of some environmental metrics? So this board will be able to get involved in that conversation as we start that contracting process for the next round. And last is the stormwater manual update. So that is something that's looking a little bit more at stormwater codes. So each of those topics, that's not all inclusive. That's kind of just some of the main work plan items for 2021. It's definitely possible other things will come up along the ways, and we'll be able to have those conversations throughout the year and add items as they come up as well. And last year, I just wanted to give an overview of the Q1 work plan. So I talked about most of these items on the last slide, but we will be at our next meeting, we'll be voting on the chair and vice chair. So next we'll hear from Tisha a little bit more about those roles. So again, that's something that we want you to be thinking about if that's something that you're interested in. At the February meeting, we'll start talking about the climate action plan and also pass the rules and regulations, again, that Tisha will be talking about next. In March, we have those other 2 items to talk about. So with that, I will go ahead and open it up to questions.
I'll start since I interrupted anyways.
Thank you.
Can you go back to, I just was a little confused, your board, I think it was the board goals one with all the different colors. Yeah, this is minor, but the difference between I think it was the providing feedback and the establishing statements, like what's the difference between those two?
Yes, so the second one is really the mechanism for the first one. So in the meetings, we'll have an opportunity to have discussion and provide feedback. So for example, on the electric vehicle ordinance, we'll have a discussion about it. If there's various items that board members think that we want to add to or change, then we'll want to take action on that. And we will put that into this recommendation report. And then that report will travel with the document so we're able to track those items.
Thank you.
Great. And Nancy has a question.
I was interested in finding out how we interact with the other boards and commissions and the city council. For example, if we have, some interest in a particular topic that's on our agenda and we come out with something, can we still go and participate in council meetings or other commissions, or do we kind of, whatever we come out as a consensus out of this committee, is that how it's moving forward?
You know what, I might see if either Tisha or Tina want to chime in on that one. Put them on the spot in the clerk's office.
This is Tisha. Tina might have something to add, but I would say that and we'll talk about this in a little bit, your recommendation reports are going to be that formal communication from you to those other entities. It doesn't preclude you, maybe you felt strongly, and this could be something that if the chair of the board could do, or you as a member, wanted to speak to that recommendation at all. I mean, there is a public comment opportunity. at pretty much all of our board and commission and council meetings. And so if it felt important to you or the board to put voice or some rationale behind the position, I've seen that done by some other commissioners. But for the most part, the recommendation document is going to be where your voice is really heard.
So we as individuals, if we may not agree with something that comes out of the board or have a strong opinion about something that you'd like tweaked along the way, that will be challenging for us to do, because really the recommendation of the board is the guiding principles. And suppose there's something I want added to the stormwater master plan, just using that as an example, and it didn't come out of this commission, can I still continue to provide comment to the city council or others to try and make that change? That's just an example. I picked that one.
Sure. This is Clerk Ayers, and Tisha, our deputy clerk, can provide some further comments if she'd like. You haven't lost your right as a citizen to speak up. You just want to make sure when you approach the podium or draft your letter that you are saying, I'm a resident, I reside in Old Town, feel strongly about X. The moment that you start saying, I'm on the such and such board and I'm not speaking on that behalf, it sort of implies this that relationship. So I just would say be really clear about what role you are speaking in, as a mother, as someone who's in the school district, or as a citizen who resides on X Street. If there's a project there that's happening, that is your best moment. There will be opportunities when items are presented to council, though, for representatives of the board to be present or enhance some of that messaging. So that'll be a nice element to have.
Thank you.
Great question. Thank you for that. Does anyone have any questions or comments? You can go ahead and put it into the chat box. I'll wait just a moment before we move on to the next presentation.
I just have a minor question. I also, following up on that, saw that Connie had emailed, and sorry if you discussed this, but I'm assuming she emailed something to everyone. It looked rather more directed to you. So I'm not touching it, but I assume that we can just sort of flag things for you rather than worry about communicating with the board about anything.
Yeah, so when emails come into the board, I think we can talk about that a little bit more, or I can hear from Tisha or Tina. I know with some other boards, sometimes the chair might take an opportunity to respond to an email from the public. Other times it might be the staff liaison that does that. And Anne, you have a question?
Mine was the same. I was just reading Connie's questions and wasn't sure if I should be her voice or if you guys will respond by email.
I think for items that come in during meeting, we'll respond by email. And then at each of our meetings going forward, we will have an opportunity for public comment. And Tisha will get into that in a minute about as we discuss some of the rules and regulations.
Great, thanks.
All right, I'm not seeing any further questions or comments, so we will go ahead and turn it over to Tisha to talk about the rules and regulations.
Hi, okay, I'm unmuted. I can't tell you how many times I've started talking and been on mute in the last 9 months. Anyways, like everyone else has said, thank you so much for being here. You've probably been in front of a screen most of the day, and now you're here this evening. So thank you so much for your service. My name is Tisha Geezer. I'm the Deputy City Clerk. I work with Tina. I've been with the City of Issaquah for about 5 years, and I'm so grateful to work for the city in large part because of the beautiful scenery that greets me every day. So I wanted to take a minute, and I'm going to be talking to you tonight kind of about some of the mechanics that will help you as you are dealing with the myriad of issues that are coming before you in this year. So I wanted to understand how many of you might have served on a nonprofit board or some kind of board, commission, committee, group somewhat similar to this or on a totally different topic. Has anybody had any past a little bit? Okay, I'm seeing a few hands because I will be talking about a lot of processes, and it may be that you know, some of those are different than what you've experienced before. So please let me know if you have questions, and Megan will help me out if I miss something during this presentation, but I'll go ahead and get started. So let me share my screen with you real quick. All right. Okay. So I'm going to talk to you tonight about your rules and regulations, which, as Megan shared, is a document that we'll be looking for you to adopt. I believe it was at your February 10th meeting. Is that right? Yep. Okay. And so tonight will be a bit of an overview and a little bit of a training too on some of your role as members. Okay. So where they fit in. Tina talked to you earlier about some state laws that apply to the group, like the Open Public Meetings Act and the Public Records Act, and certainly those are important in kind of an overarching umbrella. The Issaquah Municipal Code is our local code. That is where the ordinance that Megan referenced that sort of establishes you as a group lives. The municipal code can be amended by the City Council by an ordinance. And there are a number of provisions about the environmental board that are there, like how many members there are, the qualifications, how often you'll meet, that you'll have a chair and a vice chair, and some of your scope. The rules and regulations provide another layer of specificity. So they'll talk about when the chair is elected and the attendance requirements and the specific day of the month that you'll have your meetings. So they kind of fill in some of those blanks, and they're adopted by you, the board, and so they can also be modified by you, the board, and there are some parameters around how they can be amended that I'll cover in a little bit. And then what the rules and regulations don't say, where they're silent, we use Robert's Rules of Order as the parliamentary authority to kind of fill in those blanks as well. With that, I'm going to go ahead and move us on. Actually, I want to make one other comment here before I move on. So the rules and regulations, the draft that was included in your agenda materials tonight are not terribly creative. We're aiming for consistency among our many city boards and commissions. And so we modeled these rules, Tina and I, after our other boards and commissions. And we feel that they provide some clear guidance, some best practices, some consistency with our governing body, which is the City Council. And so while we, as you hear things tonight, and if you have some input on some of those points, that is great. And they are ultimately adopted by you. But we do feel like we are sharing with you a good, solid starting point. And as I mentioned earlier, if you have interest in either at this point in time or later on as you've met more often, kind of are in a rhythm as a board, you could certainly invite us back to talk about some changes to the document. So I'm going to go over the rules and regulations by article. The first two articles just talk about the name of the board and the members. So we're going to start with Article 3, which talks a little bit about your officers, your chair and vice chair. So the rules specify that, like with our other boards, the chair and vice chair would serve for a one-year term. They'd be, appointed by or elected by the board annually, starting May 1st. There are a few responsibilities of the chair, and in their absence, the vice chair. Some of those occur outside of a meeting, like consulting with Megan on the agenda for an upcoming meeting, maybe doing a review of the minutes, maybe serving as a spokesperson for the board on occasion. But by and large, the biggest responsibility is facilitating your monthly meetings and any special meetings that may occur. So you're getting a sense of this tonight with Megan's role. She's your acting chair tonight, but this role is really about facilitation. The chair is able to vote and participate in discussion, but they're largely facilitating the discussion. So ensuring that each of you have an equal opportunity to be heard during the meeting. They're also kind of helping you move through the agenda so that the meeting doesn't drag on for hours beyond the planned ending point. They're helping facilitate that public comment, so calling on people and whatnot. And then they're making sure that everyone's clear on what agenda item they're on, what the vote is going to be on, just kind of helping everyone keep on track. And the chair is the default in this role, but in their absence, the vice chair would be the person who would fill in for them on any of the roles I just mentioned. So I want to encourage you. I know if Megan hasn't already, she is interested in knowing which of you might have any interest or willingness to serve in these roles. And I just like you to encourage you to give it a think. If you're one of the regular members, the clerk's office and Megan are here to help support you in this role and can give you some specific training and even some specific wording for certain scenarios. So please think about it and let Megan know if you have any willingness to serve in those roles. Next, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about meetings. So Tina and Megan both mentioned the difference between regular and special meetings, and I think everyone's clear at this point that the regular meetings are the second Wednesday at 6:30. We've identified your meeting place as the Pickering Room, which is one of our video recording enabled rooms at City Hall North, which is in the City Hall that's behind Lowe's. Obviously, you're not meeting there now because the governor and the state's legislative leadership have said it's not safe. So we're meeting virtually. We'll continue to meet virtually or in some hybrid situation as long as they tell us that's what we should be doing. But when they stop telling us that's what we should be doing, you will be expected to attend the meeting in person in the Pickering Room, or if a different room is chosen in the future. And that's where the public, of course, will be as well. So it is important, as Tina mentioned, because your regular meetings are kind of your fixture of the month. But as she also shared, you may have other special meetings with other boards and commissions or special topics, etc. Tina also talked to you a bit about a quorum. So that is the magic number 5 for your group of 9 regular members. No meeting can be held without it. We really value your attendance and participation. So attendance expectations, as I mentioned, right now attending virtually is great. In the future, attending at the physical location will be the expectation. And we really want to know if you're not available to attend. We want to know far in advance is fine. If you're requesting time off work for a trip, let us know. And when I say us, let Megan know that you'll be traveling. You could copy the board chair as well. This helps her if she needs to schedule a special meeting, so she might see that you're not available. So even if you're not going to be gone on the second Wednesday, just let her know. And it's also important to provide this advance notice because it means that you'll have an excused absence if you won't be at the meeting. And so at the beginning of the meeting, the chair will say that, Cameron is excused tonight. In his absence, can we have an alternate volunteer to serve? And it's noted in the minutes. Also, I'll mention that in the city code, it does say for the environmental board, like many of our other boards, that if someone doesn't attend a regular meeting, 3 regular meetings in a row, and they have not been excused, that is cause to be removed from the board. So so please communicate with us and let us know if you can't attend. If you have something come up just shortly before the meeting, just give us any advance notice you can. And again, that should be Megan. And if you can copy the board chair, that's helpful. And we'll note you as excused. Any questions so far? You're good? Okay, great. Okay, let's talk for a minute about committees. Those came up earlier. Committees are provided for in your rules. They should be used sparingly. They're for situations where you, as a board, maybe you feel like some additional work needs to be done, but maybe there's not the time, since you'll be meeting monthly, or the capacity for the full board to make a decision, and you feel willing to delegate some further research and recommendation to a smaller group of people in the board. When you do this, you need to be really specific, and you would do this by a motion at your board meeting. You need to identify who is on your board, and you'll note that we are stipulating that it should be no more than 4 members to keep you below that quorum threshold. And you need to stipulate what's the scope of this committee, when do they need to report back to you, and that's just important to put some clear bounds on it. And so maybe it's that they provide an update or a recommendation at your next meeting. Now, they wouldn't be making a recommendation on behalf of the board, but they would share their recommendation with you, and then you could choose as the full group to formalize that as your recommendation or not. One quick comment here, the reason we're recommending 4 is, again, it keeps you under the quorum threshold, so your meeting doesn't need to go through the same rigmarole as your regular meetings of noticing in a public meeting space. You certainly, your recommendation, should and would be shared with the public, absolutely. But one thing to be mindful of is there are certain things that can trigger those broader Open Meetings Act requirements, and that would be taking public testimony. So just communicate with Megan, and if she has questions, she can let us know as you work to form committees. But that's just sort of the highlights of what that might look like for your board. I wanted to take a minute to talk to you about the role of regular members versus alternate members. I know you have 3 alternate members on the board, and again, thank you so much for your service. The expectations on you as alternates is the same as that of regular members. We expect you to attend meetings and be prepared, but there are some distinctions. So if an alternate is attending and they are just serving as an alternate, they can participate in the questions that might occur after a staff report and even a little bit of that initial discussion. But once a motion is made and the group's kind of drilled down and you're moving towards your formal recommendation, you're deliberating that. At that point, the alternates need to take a step back and observe. So they're not to participate in the deliberation on a motion or to vote on a motion, nor is it appropriate for them to make a motion when they're in an alternate role. But much of the time, there's going to be opportunity for discussion. For example, anytime you have multiple touches on an item before you're making a recommendation, the alternates would have the ability to be part of that initial forming and input and discussion. And then, of course, if any regular member is absent, then at the beginning of the meeting, the chair is going to work with you to identify one of those alternates who can be plugged in to serve as a regular voting member for that meeting. And one comment here, because we have some youth members on the board, we also have a youth alternate. And so if one of the youth members is not able to attend, then our youth alternate, is that maybe you, Surya? I think, yeah. Then Surya would be the sort of the default to fill in for either of the youth alternates. So just want to be clear on that point. And again, let me know if you have any questions about this. And I do want to add here, if you are an alternate member and for some reason it's unclear to you if you're serving as a regular member that night, please say something. We want to make sure you're clear so that you're not unsure when a vote's coming up if you're voting or not. Just ask for some clarity. But again, we'll be encouraging the chair to address that right at the beginning of the meeting so everyone is clear. All right, so let's talk a little bit about motions. They're kind of the way in which you make formal decisions as a group. So we talked a little bit, and you guys had such great questions earlier about just how decisions come to be. What if you disagree? as the environmental board, once 5 of you decide on a position, that is the position of the environmental board. Certainly that doesn't mean as an individual you can't disagree and maybe even be vocal about that. But I should say, once the group has made a decision, it's actually, in parliamentary procedure, it's actually not appropriate to criticize a past action that's been taken by the board. So there's kind of this acceptance. The board has agreed, we're moving on. And the motions are the mechanism for that. So let's just go through like a typical flow. So at your next meeting, you're going to be talking about EV charging. So Megan's going to give you a presentation, and there's going to be some Q&A and maybe some initial discussion. And then maybe you're going to start to feel ready, like we're ready to start talking about our real feelings about this proposal. That's when you should make a motion. Someone should make the motion, and it's probably going to sound something like, I move that we approve the recommendation report prepared by staff for the EV charging proposal. And one of you will need to second that. And by seconding, you're just saying, yeah, we agree, we're ready to discuss this. It's not even committing you to vote for it or against it. It's just allowing it to be before the group. At that point, you're in debate and deliberation. We'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. It's important to be clear what the motion is. If it was said quickly and you're like, wait, what exactly did they say? Ask them to write it down, ask them to repeat it. That's totally appropriate. And I think with that, we're going to move over. To debate. But actually, let's play this out for a minute. So somebody makes that motion to approve the recommendation report, and I'm envisioning Megan's going to write that up, and it's going to kind of maybe include the city's proposal. We'll say, here you go. If you like this, we're making it easy for you. And so the motion's before the group, but maybe you don't like it. Maybe you think the requirements for EV charging in apartment buildings is just too weak, and you think it needs to be more stringent. The appropriate thing for you to do is to make a motion to amend the recommendation to include more stringent requirements for apartment buildings. And then you need someone to second it. If nobody seconds it because nobody is interested in talking about that, or then it just goes away and you tried. If someone's willing to second that amendment, then that's before the group. And the debate should be about that aspect of the proposal until you're ready to vote on that amendment. And once you voted on that amendment, say there's not enough support. Maybe only 3 people thought that was agreed with that. That amendment goes away, and now you can talk about the broader proposal again. So that's kind of that's sort of a typical flow for some of your items. And there's lots of different scenarios, but I think that's a good general one to share.
Tisha, we had a question come in. Rishi?
Yeah, I had a question. For motions, do they need to be written and sent out ahead of the meeting, or is that something that happens spontaneously?
Yeah, either way. So I imagine you'll kind of develop sort of a default motion that's going to work. So I'm assuming it's going to be something like approving the recommendation report for X, whatever the the stormwater master plan. And again, I'm assuming Megan will have prepared sort of that proposal. And then, so that's going to be sort of standard. Now, Rishi, if you knew in advance you wanted to propose an amendment to that because there was a piece of it you didn't agree with or you felt needed to be further discussed, whatever, you could email Megan and say, Megan, I'm planning to offer an amendment to this tonight. Can you share this with the board? And that would be great. But you don't have to. I mean, it's always appreciated, I think, by both your staff liaison and the members to have a little time to think about that. But you also can certainly do it during the meeting. And you might just want to have it written down so that you can restate it, or you can put it in the chat so everyone else can see it clearly. Good question. Okay, so let's talk about debate. So you've got a motion or an amendment and you're debating it. The debate, let's talk about just some best practices. Best practices are everyone gets a chance to speak once before anyone speaks the second time. Another best practice is no one speaks for more than 10 minutes, which is a long time. So I'd encourage you to even consider shortening that. The comments need to relate to the motion that's before you. Again, if you're talking about an amendment about requirements for apartment buildings, try and keep your comments to that piece until that vote is taken. It's really about equity. It's about ensuring that everyone is heard. And it's about being courteous and respectful of each other. Let's go to this next slide. It's about not interrupting each other. So the facilitator for the debate and for the whole meeting is the chair. And so during debate, you'll type comment when you want to talk, and the chair is going to try and help, moderate that. And so the chair, if you want to talk, if you indicate you talk, she's going to say, okay, yes, Danny, go ahead. And you'll make your comments. One thing, I think debate is really, I think a lot of it's very intuitive. It's just talking about and sharing your ideas. But I do think one thing that is easy to fall into is kind of a back and forth. So if maybe you and one other board member, maybe you're kind of like opposed, you're in opposition on an idea. So Danny shares her comments, and then Dan shares his, and Danny hears something she doesn't agree with, and she kind of wants to address it. It's not actually really appropriate to start getting into like that back and forth. You want to kind of keep it with the whole group. So you've made your comments and you're listening to your other board members, kind of keep track of what you want to address, so that next time it's your turn to talk, you can sort of address it all at one time instead of engaging in this back and forth. We don't want any one or two or even three members dominating. We really want to make sure we're making space for everyone's perspectives to be heard. Okay. And Megan's kind of covered this, but in virtual meetings, and I know it's hard not to do, but don't put the tenor of your comment or question. Just put comment or question. We want to make sure anyone from the public who's on the phone, hears and sees anything. So just wait to state your question or comment until you have the mic. All right. Next, we're going to talk about voting. So let's say everyone's debating, and it may be that there's time that you can just debate until you're done talking, or maybe the chair is saying, okay, we have some other items, so let's try, I'm going to give everyone one more chance, and then we're ready to vote. Let's talk about, there's a few things to think about with voting. The first one is who is voting. So Megan, I imagine, will be calling the roll, so she'll be helping with this. So just, again, as an alternate, just make sure you're clear on if you're voting or not, and ask before the vote if you're unsure. If you have a conflict of interest on something that's coming before the board, so maybe a property ownership or professional conflict, reach out to Megan in advance, and she can also connect you with our city attorney if there's some more questions about what that might look like. What your rules say is that if you have a conflict, let the group know, and if the board feels like it is truly a conflict and you shouldn't be participating, then a majority of them can decide that, and then you'd excuse yourself from the room, or in the virtual format, we'd put you in the lobby while that item is being addressed, and you wouldn't be voting, so you just not counted in the vote. We also do have abstentions. They're provided for in the rules, but we don't encourage them. Abstaining would be if maybe you just didn't feel comfortable voting. Maybe you felt like you didn't have enough information, or I don't know, had some other reason why you didn't want to be on the record. The chair is not going to call for abstentions when he or she, they're going to call for the yays and the nays. So if you plan to abstain, you need to say so in the debate. And just so you know, an abstention in the rules currently would be counted as a yes vote. And that mirrors our city council's rules. I think that's really designed to help to really encourage you to vote by saying, even if you don't vote, your vote's counting. So just vote, because we need you. We want to know how you feel about these things. And then there's two different voting mechanisms. The first one, number 3 on the slide, is called unanimous consent. This is great for your minutes, or maybe for something really minor, like you notice a typo on the recommendation report or a word that is not correct, or minor things. That sounds like the chair saying, all right, so everybody, we've got the January 13th minutes on the agenda. Is there any objection to approving these? And they'd kind of wait, and nobody would say anything, and they'd say, okay, great. Your silence is implying consent, and they'd say, great, they're unanimously approved. Moving on, if you notice a typo in the minutes, and the chair said that, she'd say, okay, is there any objection to approving these as presented? You'd say, yes, actually there is. I have a correction, and then from there you could redo that unanimous consent or take a formal vote. For anything that is really substantial, like your recommendations on these policy issues, I'd recommend taking a full-fledged vote, and that's going to be in the virtual format. That's going to be a roll call, where Megan calls you each by name, and you say yay or nay. In the physical realm, it's usually like raising your hands or just saying yay or nay, but it's a little more formal with these virtual meetings. And let's go over what that formal vote, actually I already did that. Let's go over what that formal vote sounds like. The chair would have this rule, and they would say, all right, is there any further debate on this issue? All right, I'm not seeing any. So the motion before the group is to approve the recommendation report for the EV charging proposal as presented. All those actually, no, it's not all those in favor. This is when the roll call would be called now in our virtual realm. So it would be Anne, Cameron, Dan, and you'd unmute and say aye and nay. The chair would then announce the vote total and the outcome. So you need, for almost everything, you just need a simple majority. So if you have 9 voting members, that's going to be 5, or if that number is 8, it's also 5. If that number is 7 in attendance that night, it's 4. So it just is the majority of however many regular members are voting. And then the chair might say, okay, great, that was approved. Megan, please keep us posted on, council's action on this item, and then you'd move on. Any questions about that? One thing I spoke earlier during debate about how you don't interrupt, but I do think when it comes to voting, and I hope I've made this clear, when it comes to voting or just wanting to know where you're at in the meeting, interrupt if you're unclear. Before that vote gets called, don't wait until your name is called to say, do so in advance. Another thing your rules provide for is a standing order of business. So this is kind of the flow of your regular meetings. You'll see near the top is public comments, and that's a time, and that's going to be typical of all your meetings. Tonight is a little different with this sort of more training format, but that will be a time when members of the public can share input with you and thoughts with you, and that is usually facilitated by the chair. Usually, they're provided like a 5-minute time frame to make their comments. And then you move down into your regular business items and reports, and I'm sure this will be shaped as you begin meeting what exactly the reports may consist of, and then your adjournment. You all received an agenda last week. Did anyone have trouble accessing the agenda? Just kind of looking for any, okay, seems like it was fine. Okay, so that will typically be sent out to you the Friday prior to your meetings. It's available on the city's website. It's on that, Megan shared those links to the board and commission pages on our website, and under the environmental board, there are links to all of your agenda materials. We want you to read through those materials so that you're prepared for these meetings. And I want to let you know that we do, there's some thought behind, your agendas and plenty of thought behind your agenda materials. And then also we have some indicators for you. So when you're looking at your agenda and you have multiple items, you can understand, okay, am I just listening? So you had some information today from Tina. She shared that informational training with you. Or might we discuss? This item is a discussion item because it is something that you'll be acting on. So maybe you want to share some input after my presentation. And then an action item will be something that you'll be voting on, or it's planned that you would take action on that item that night. So hopefully that's a helpful key for you. Okay, and we're nearing the end here. So as I mentioned earlier, in the absence of these rules, we use Robert's Rules of Order. There's a new 12th edition that's out that can sort of fill in the blanks. You know, I'd say that also, you know, do your best, and your chair and vice chair will do their best. But, you know, generally our boards and commissions also have a little informality. You know, it's a small group and you're going to get to know each other over the months. And so don't feel that you need to be, you know, rigidly procedural at every moment. However, they are tremendously helpful guidelines to keep the group on track, to keep things equitable, to keep things moving forward and efficient. And so these on the screen here are just a few key principles that you'll find in Robert's Rules. They were gathered by a parliamentarian here in Washington State. Jurassic Parliament is the name of her business, and I just think they're great principles to keep in mind during your meetings. Also, if you love this topic and want to learn more, or maybe if you decide to chair, I might recommend that you take a look at one of the yellow books. The one in the middle is huge and not super fun to read, but the other two do have some nice, helpful, you know, some scripts, and just they present some different scenarios and how they can be handled. Okay, and lastly, we'll talk about amending your rules and regulations. So we tried to be careful in crafting your rules and regulations to be clear about what provisions were in our city code, because as I mentioned, those can only be amended by the city council. But the things that are in the rules, like most of the content that I've just shared with you, there can be modifications to those. It may be that over time you find you have some procedures that the board is sort of practicing and you'd like to formalize those in your rules. That is something that you can do. Maybe you want to tweak another aspect of these, of what we've gone over tonight. So you can do that. You'd need to let Megan know that. It'd need to be included on your next agenda. And then, as I mentioned, a majority of the full board, so that would be 5 people, would need to vote in support of any changes. And as Tina mentioned, the clerk's office would love to be involved in that. We care about your rules, and we care about you know, helping you determine the best way to function. And with that, I am going to stop sharing here. And you can let me know if you have any questions. And also, this is an opportunity for some discussion. We are nearing the end of the meeting, but these will be coming before you again. So if you have any thoughts in response to the information I shared with you tonight, please share.
So just a reminder, you can just enter into the chat if you have a question or comment. Jamie.
Yeah, my question, and I'm not sure who this might be, Tisha, I'm not sure, but is just around term expiration and the appointment process. So if anyone could expand on how that works.
Do you want to take that, Tina?
Yes. Are you just asking me in general how terms are structured and who's in what positions, that sort of thing?
Well, I'm just curious, like when, so like my term expires in May of 2021, like what happens at that time? And then
yes,
with
okay,
how
understood.
a new member is appointed. Yeah.
Excellent. So as a new board, we couldn't have everyone start at the same time with the same expiration dates. So what we do with new boards and commissions is the ordinance that council adopts says, we're going to split them up so that you have this rotating out term and a new one starting. So once, say, that position that expires April of 2021, the new position would be effective May 1. Now, we do an annual recruitment, and that's going to start very soon. And there's an application process similar to what you've already seen. And then we review them for qualifications, conduct interviews, the 3-member committee. So you'll have 2 people from your board or commission help Megan conduct those interviews. And it'll be 2 people whose terms are not expiring. Typically, it's the chair and vice chair if possible. If not, we'll work to loop a different board commission member in. And then they say, okay, let's find out what the right fit is. Does this person still want to continue on? And then they make a recommendation to the mayor. The mayor is the one who makes the appointment. And then in order to make it so, council, it then goes to council and they confirm it. So it is a process that takes a little bit of time. If you find that for whatever reason, say in September, 3 of your members have dropped out for, moving away, or some, just can't participate anymore, that's when Megan will come to the clerk's office and say, look, we're finding this member deficiency. Is this the right time to do a mid-year recruitment, or should we, move on with our current folks and ensure that we still have a quorum and can get our work done, and just wait for that annual recruitment? So we do have one coming up. One of our policies, the mayor's policy, says reappointments are not guaranteed, but as a new board, your involvement, the knowledge that you're gaining, it would seem very unusual not to have a member who is interested and involved be reappointed in this time frame. It's just the nature of trying to get that your knowledge base built up, and so that you all can be a strong board. I see, so, and looks happy about that.
Great, thank you, Tina.
Okay.
And we have a question from Danny.
Just wondering about how recommendations are officially given to city council. So I can give them, there's something that, like some plan that we're super passionate about, are we allowed to go present that, or like how does that process work?
I'll let Megan speak up, but I'll just say, as a staff liaison, she will be assembling your materials and your votes, and communicating that back to the organization. She'll be packaging it up to the clerk's office through the agenda bills that go to council. If it warrants a representative of the board to be present or speak to it, say under audience comments, it really depends on the type of presentation that it is, then yes, you would have that opportunity to be part of that group, or maybe there's a rotation. If the chair couldn't make it, then someone else may have an interest in being that person. But Megan is the lead and will convey your recommendations.
Yes. Rishi has a question.
Yeah, I had a question regarding agendas and whether that's something that can be like, whether it's flexible and it can be changed during a meeting, or if that's like strictly has to be kind of changed prior.
Well, as clerks, we like structure, and the public will like that too. So you do have some flexibility to, say, reorder some items if it just naturally was you have a presenter who had some issues with time commitments, and the chair was accommodating to say, look, due to time constraints, we are going to move item D up as the first item of presentation. Adding new items of business, I would say that's not appropriate, but Tishik, our or parliamentary expert could speak to that. Sort of other business, if you wanted to say have a future agenda item, that might be the time to say, look, I would love to learn more about this, if it's possible to have this on a future agenda, and Megan and the chair can figure out what the best timing is, if it's appropriate, because we want to make sure it ties into your work plan and isn't off topic. Tisha, do you approve of that message?
Yeah, I do. Moving things around within the meeting, a majority of you can decide to do that. But like Tina mentioned, just be mindful that the public's looking to and might, be thinking about when they want to be present to hear something. And then yes, I totally agree. If you have something you want on a future agenda, that does get a little bit more complicated, but and that could be something that you make into a motion to get the support of the board for, but would be really helpful to do that in advance, because just beyond the parliamentary part of it, it's also that transparency with the public and giving them the heads up what's going to be discussed in advance.
All right. Do we have any other last questions or comments before we close our meeting? And I'm not seeing any. And as this is the first meeting I'm doing the duties for, Tisha and Tina, am I missing anything?
You're doing a great job. And I thank you to our deputy clerk for, she is a rock star at Parliament and rules and regs. So I really thank her expertise for being here and helping shape your rules. I would also say that, try not to over parliament. There's sort of a consensus based, and if motion making, we don't want it to get too complicated, but you have the tools in front of you, and we are happy to come back and help you if you need it.
And good, this delay gave someone else an opportunity for a question. So go ahead,
Exactly.
Jamie.
Yeah, it snuck under the wire. I was just curious, like after these initial meetings, if you could speak to kind of how the staff liaison and the chair's responsibilities, like what the dividing line between those two things are or will be.
Yeah, I think we have a good slide or a good memo that we can push out and share on what the chair's role is and how they help the staff liaison shape things and get the work plan together.
Great, thank you.
All right. With that, I am not seeing any further questions or comments. So we will be sending out the meeting invitation for the January 27th meeting soon, and then you'll receive that agenda beforehand. So we will see everyone then. So if there's no further business for this evening, then we will go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.